So we're going to look at animated because animated is a really nice way to demonstrate how the bridge works and how you can really kind of get a gut feeling for problems with blocking the bridge and blocking the JavaScript thread. It's hard to get a more visceral reaction to these kinds of things than like things not responding to touches or animations just appearing really jerky. And so this is why animated is a really great example. So what is animated? It's a weird name, right? It's like past tense for some reason. The former MC of React Europe, who you all are probably familiar with, Christopher Chateau, or Viju, I can't say his name. So he designed this API a while ago, and he did it based off of looking at a few really popular and kind of best in class, it's like a car commercial, best in class APIs for animations. And I think it takes a lot of inspiration from D3 in particular. D3, you have values, and then you interpolate other values from those values. And it turns out that this is a really nice way to do animations. So you have a value, you interpolate something from that, like some kind of style, maybe an opacity or translate, transform value, and then you apply it to a view, and then you animate that value, and then the interpolations all just update, and the styles all update in response to that. So let's do a really simple example to show you what I mean. Feel free to follow along if you like. So I have an animated.view that doesn't do anything at all, but that's fine. Why am I doing animated.view and not view? I don't expect any of you to have the answer to that, so I'm going to tell you the answer. Animated.view is aware of its props, and it's aware of whether any of its props are animated values. So what's an animated value? Let's create one. Let's call this one enter. So here I have created an animated value. I've initialized it to 0, and I've just called it enter. Fine, nothing special. In component did mount, I will do something shortly. For now, let's add some style to this. So I'm going to say the width is 200, and height is 200, and background color is red. Right? Let's get rid of that. And just add a padding top of 100. All right. Constants is fine or not used, whatever. So I want to animate this in so it just like fades in. I want it to go from 0 opacity to 1. So in this case, I don't need to actually interpolate anything. I just need to actually add the value like this. Of course, oops, sorry, this does state done enter. This doesn't actually do anything yet because the animated value is 0. So what I've done here is I've taken this animated value, I've told it that it is assigned to a specific animated view and bound to that view's opacity. or rather that view's opacity is bound to that animated value. So if the animated value updates, then the view's opacity should update in turn. So what I'll do now is actually start animating that value. And that's an interesting kind of thing to think about, because animations for people often, you don't think about numbers, right? You don't, maybe you do. If you're someone who's done animations a good amount, then to you animations probably are largely like curves and numbers and timings and things like that. But if you aren't someone who's done a lot of animations, to you animations are like Mickey Mouse and things bouncing on your screen and like just really like artsy, fluidy, like whatever sort of stuff. But really everything is like, there's a number that is like driving everything. There's a curve for these animations that explain sort of how they maybe start off going slow and then speed up, or maybe they like spring around a target value. And so this value that we have here of 0, we want to take it and we want to change it from 0 to 1, but we don't just want to set it to 1. We want to make it go maybe like 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, right? That would be like a linear timing function, increase by 0.1 until it gets to the point that we want. So we could do animated.timing for that. We could say this.state.enter, and we could say make it take 5,000 milliseconds, and then we do start. Oh, I didn't say to value 1. Right, so now that fades in over 5 seconds. People clear on what's happening there? Is that pretty good?
Using like set states, you change enter value instead, right?
So this is a really great question. So the question was, is this using set state? So if you've used React for a while, you're probably familiar with like React tween state. Maybe you've used that before. You can kind of sometimes get away with using that on the web. What that does is very similar to this. You take some state value and you tell it how, some kind of animation function for how it's going to go from one value to another value, and then it will set state at certain intervals to update that value to another value and re-render the component. So this is actually different from that because, as you might know, if you're familiar with React, re-rendering components a lot is like pretty expensive, especially if they have a lot of children. And so ideally what you want to do is just update the value directly. But when you re-render the component, you don't want to lose any like transient value that was updated without doing a full re-render. So animated actually gets around this problem. What it does is it will update these properties directly, and I'll show you how that works in a moment. But then as you re-render, it will actually have the most recent value set on this animated value internally, so that when you actually do re-render this component, it'll still remain at the same part in the animation. So it allows you to perform like fairly optimized animations, but of course you're still limited to the JavaScript thread in this context, which I'll explain shortly. So let's look at another kind of animation. This one doesn't let you specify duration. It's called Spring. And I think this one is probably better. Let's give it a scale. I'm going to interpolate it. So I say this.state.enter.interpolate. And I could say input range 0 to 1, right? Because I'm animating it from 0 to 1. output range, maybe it starts at half size, and at 1, sure, we'll make it go to 1. Then we can do transform and scale. It's kind of interesting. We can specify something like bounciness, I think it is, 50. I don't know what 50 is going to do here. Whoa. Right? So all we did there was we told it, this is a kind of strange syntax for transform, which I can talk about in a second, but it's not the most salient point here. We took this enter value and we said when enter is equal to 0, scale is equal to 0.5. And interpolate the values in between that, knowing that when, or rather extrapolate the values, knowing that when input is at 1, then output is at 1. And you can actually provide any number of options here. So maybe you want to say that like at 0.5, we actually are larger than 1. So we go like small and then shoot up really big and then go back to 1. And there are various types of extrapolations that you can provide. That's in the animated API, and you can look at that. So then a quick side, because I want to cover these two things, was this weird syntax for transform, and then how we are manually updating these views. So for transform, the order that you apply transforms in matters. And so to apply transforms, I could also write this in this way. You give an array, because you can also apply transforms many times. You could do scale and then rotate and then scale and whatever else you want to do. And so you pass in an array, and then in the array you have objects where the key of the object is a transform value. So let's add another thing here. Let's say, I don't know, rotate x. This isn't even going to do anything, really. So, okay, I kind of rotated it a little bit like that. So that's the syntax of that. I mean, it's in the documentation, not a big deal. Just wanted you to kind of be familiar with what's happening. Yeah, sure. Stuff from Perry. Good. So the way that this does the updates performantly without doing set state is actually just direct manipulation of the view. So it's just like if in the browser, you find the reference to a DOM node and then change the background color to something manually. It's the same thing. However, in React Native, the way that you do this is through a function on a ref called setNativeProps. And this is available on any of the native view components. So on this view, I don't know, we could do let's just say we have none of that going on here. We give it an opacity of 0.5. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. We have to give it a ref. I'm just going to make this a view. right? So I manually just set the opacity to 1 on the view. So this is what Animated is using internally. It's getting the ref to the view and calling set native props on request animation frame so that it doesn't have to re-render the entire component to provide a new value. Does that make sense? But like I said, it also updates its internal state so that if you re-render the component while the animation's happening, it has the current value on the animated value, current value of the animation, so that it doesn't interrupt the animation. Okay.
Can you look at the values while it's animating to decide if you want to do some sort of re-render even though?
Sure. Yeah, so question was, can you look at the values while it's animating so you can decide if you want to re-render or whatever you might want to do? You can, yeah. So you could say like this.state.enter get value, but as you might guess from the 2 underscores in front of get value, you probably shouldn't do that specific thing because underscores usually mean don't touch this, it's internal and it might change. But you could, I believe it's add listener, and then in there it's like some object where you get value. That's it, what did I typo here? You go there. You go there. Let's do console log value. And we'll just animate that thing. All right, so you can see here I'm animating it to 50. So we start off at 1. And it's like, whoa, jumping up pretty fast. And then settling around 50. Make sense? I think it's worth maybe taking a minute because I'm going to talk about animated for probably another half hour. And I think it's really fun to try it. So why don't we take like 10 minutes and everybody just try doing animate some property. I animated opacity. Try doing something that you think would be like funny or stupid and animate it and use spring or use timing. Try and use an interpolation if you want to get fancy. Maybe you want to make something spin, right? So yeah, we'll do that and I'll just walk around and help people, as will Devin and Perry. And maybe James, if he's up to it. Great. And go. Can I put which on Slack? Oh, they're like set native. Yeah, sure.